We've got a full panel right now, and I'm going to bring my fellow panelists onto the stage. We've got Sachin Kansal, who's the VP of Product at Uber, and Barbra Watkins, who's a local courier here for Uber Eats. So we're going to have a fun discussion. Come on up, guys. Yeah, give them a hand.
And it so happened that before Uber, I actually found myself in the taxi industry. I used to work for an app called Flywheel, and that's where I got exposure to the world of transportation. And I spent a lot of time with taxi drivers and taxi fleets. And probably not surprisingly, I found myself at Uber. When I joined, I worked on safety. So safety is obviously a very important priority for us. So I spent a lot of time with riders, with drivers, not just here in the US, but all over the world. And about a couple of years ago, I was asked to expand my role to cover driver and courier. So the cool thing about my role is not just that we are building a cool experience and a cool app, that's great, but the mission of the role and the responsibility is huge. Because we have earners, whether they are driving or delivering, coming onto the platform, and they want a flexible way to earn. And it is my job and my team's job to make sure that we can enable that. And the other great part of my job is to work with Barbra and a lot of other couriers and address their issues. I'll end with a quick anecdote. So on my first day when I took this job, my first piece of onboarding was an introduction to the Barbra. Barbra has been giving us feedback and holding our feet to the fire for the last 6 years, and she's a very important part of our product development process. So.
Very cool. Well, we're setting the bar high for Barbra now, and you've been actually driving for Uber for 6 years. You started off doing rides, and for the past couple of years, you've been doing deliveries. So, Barbra, I'd love to know, tell us a little bit more about yourself and sort of why you're delivering now.
I was recovering from some injuries.
Just hold that.
I was recovering from some injuries, and a friend of mine had joined Uber and said, "You ought to try this. You can do it as much as you want." And so I almost quit the first day because I couldn't figure out how to finish a ride when I had dropped the person off at a spot, not the drop-off spot. And I thought, this is ridiculous. I can't do this. But I just kind of kept on little by little, and I was very casual about it. So we would go to the movies, are you going to drive after the movie? Yeah, I'll drive for a couple of hours. And then little by little, I got more interested in it and got working harder at it. And I have a horse, and Uber pays for the horse. So people ask me, why am I working this much, or why am I not working more? I say, it pays for the horse, and that's all that's really important. And so I started out driving for people and stuff, and I really enjoyed it because I got a chance to talk to people from all different countries, and I speak several languages, so it was interesting. If I had Russian passengers in the back seat and they'd be chatting away, and then when they left I'd say, "Da svidaniya," and they were like, "Oh, how much did she understand of what we were saying back there?" And I speak Spanish, so but I really enjoyed talking to people from different countries and learning, what do you eat there, and what's the religion like, and why do you wear your hair like that, and it was really fun. But when by that time I was working pretty seriously. I worked 4 days a week, 9 to 10 hours or more a day, but I only work Monday through Thursday, and I get up and before dawn and go up and take care of my horse and stuff, and then I come home and take a shower and start to drive. And people say, "Well, why don't you drive on weekends?" And I said, "Because weekends are mine and my horses, and this is not how I make my living. This pays for the horse. As long as it pays for the horse, that's all that really matters." So when the pandemic started, the first thing that happened was that news went out, everybody should stay home. And I drove home and said, "Okay." And Uber said, "No, not you. You get back out there." And so then we start to fight the people wearing masks or not wearing masks. I'm sorry, I can't drive you if you're not wearing a mask. Well, I'll pull my t-shirt up. That doesn't count as a mask. Sorry. And then I would tell them, I had those surgical masks, and I would sell them for $2. I said, just put $2 on the tip, and here's your mask. I have to buy these, so here's your mask. But it just started getting really unpleasant, and nobody wanted to talk, or and so I started doing Eats and combining the two, and I combined them for about a week, and then I thought, here are these people getting in the car where I have just delivered a pizza or Indian curry, and the whole car smelled like pizza and Indian curry, and I said, well, this is not fair. So I decided I was just going to do Eats, and that's worked out really well for me. I make enough money to pay for the course. It's not as much as you make when you're delivering people, but it's enough to pay for the horse, and it's less stress. I don't end up in San Francisco at 6 o'clock at night having to drive all the way home. I live in San Jose, and so it's much more local, and I miss not talking to people, and I miss not being able to drive in the carpool lane, but it's enough money to pay for the horse, and it keeps me from sitting on the couch and reading, which is what I would do if I weren't driving.
There we go. I appreciate the background, and I mean, I think it's interesting that you hit on one of the themes and topics that I really want to explore. I mean, really, at this conference that I think we're exploring is this shift, right? We talked about the shift in the curb. We talked about really here the shift from rideshare to delivery. I mean, for those who don't know, I started off as the rideshare guy. Sometimes I've been the scooter guy at times, and now the last mile delivery guy, so we really cover it all. But I think this shift from rides to delivery is interesting. And Sachin, I really wanted to hear from you because Uber does both. And I'm curious how you balance the two and how you think about, the experiences of someone like Barbra who, frankly, how do you think about it? I mean, do some people, should you push them to do both? Do you want to do them to do rides or delivery? I mean, I imagine that there's good and bad, so I'd love to know how you think about that duality.
I think Barbra's personal story is actually an excellent example of how a platform should work. Because Barbra is someone who used to drive, now she delivers. We have people who have gone the other way. We have people who used to drive, they now do both driving and delivering, and vice versa as well. Our job is simple. We want to enable all of those configurations as easily as possible. Now, in the app, what does that mean? So that's where a lot of work goes in. Because right from the time when you onboard onto the platform and you're uploading your driver's license and you're going through requirements, you want to make it very easy, and we recently launched a completely new way of onboarding so that you can decide, I want to do both driving and delivering, and you'll go on a certain path. So it doesn't feel like it's after the fact. But then on a day-to-day basis, when you open the app, is it clear to you, where do I go for rides demand and where do you go for delivery demand? And then also, a lot of our earners, what they end up doing is, I'm going to deliver at dinner time, but I'm going to drive at commute time. So what we want to make sure is it's easy for them to switch. So our goal right now, and by the way, that is the uniqueness of the Uber platform, that we have both these modes, both driving and delivering, and we do want to make sure that earners are aware of them, and then after that they can choose to do whatever they want to, and we want to allow that flexibility.
Yeah, no, I really like the concept, and I mean, what we tell a lot of couriers and what we hear from a lot of couriers is, for example, if you do rides during the day and you want to stick local at the end of the evening, you switch over to delivery because you know that you're not going to get a delivery order for more than 2, 3, 4 miles, versus if you're taking a ride on Uber, you might easily get 20, 30, 40 miles. I feel like anytime I drive in LA, you're almost guaranteed to get at least one ride to Orange County, which can be good or bad. And so, I mean, are there any disadvantages to that though, Sachin? I mean, obviously, Barbra mentioned an interesting one where, it sounds great, do a ride with a person, do a ride with a burrito, but what about that lingering smell, right? What about, the customer that then comes in and gets to rate the driver, right? So I imagine that there might be some challenges, or what do you think some of the what's a disadvantage of, having both?
I think a disadvantage.
Trunk. You have a car with a trunk.
Trunk.
Closed trunk.
Close the trunk.
Yeah.
And Barbra, I know you've got a couple tips for customers, so we're going to get to that in a second. So if you're an Uber Eats customer or rider, we've got some feedback.
Yeah, I think what she said in terms of, if someone wants to do both and they are suffering from I put Indian curry in the back seat and now the car is smelling of Indian curry, our guidance is please use the trunk, and there's a way for them to use the trunk quite safely. so that the food is not spilling. I think that's ends up being sort of one of their main concerns. I think what we have heard in terms of personal preferences is, as Barbara said, some people like to have the conversation with the riders in the car, and other people like, I feel much safer just having food in my car. And our job is to make sure that we can ensure any of that flexibility. Some people who deliver, they're like, I don't want to get out of my car twice. First at pickup and then at drop off. I'm actually much happier just being in the car for the next 5 hours, and we want to make sure that we do that.
Yeah, no, I think it's very interesting concept about really finding, it's almost sort of like the perfect product market fit for the right person. Are they more of a delivery person? Are they more of a rideshare person? I did a funny panel recently, and there was the owner of a big taxi fleet in New York City, and during the pandemic, they shifted to delivery, and he had huge problems with all of his guys, all of his taxi drivers. They didn't want to get out of the car. They were like, I'm used to sitting in my car. I don't want to get out of the car. I don't want to take this food to the door. So Barbara, I'm curious, on your end, talk to us a little bit about your experience. I mean, we know, for example, that, actually I think Uber Eats shared that, 40% of couriers are actually female drivers. That's one thing that we hear, with rides versus delivery. So tell us a little bit about your actual experience delivering food. Why do you enjoy it?
Well, I feel the pain of the taxi drivers who don't want to get out of the car. For 4 years, I actually was worried about DVT because I was 10 or 12 hours sitting in the car. And with delivery, then you have to go into the restaurant, and then you have to find, take it to the food. And the only problem is that the food does not come out of the restaurant and jump into your car, and it does not jump out and go up the stairs to the apartment. And I don't drive at night anymore because you can't find, the way apartment complexes are set up, you can't find the particular building where the particular apartment is going to be, because they've got a number like way up there on the top of the wall. This is D or this is C, and so that's the only disadvantage to it. But I'm perfectly happy driving 9 hours and stopping before it gets dark. And other people, if you want to be able to drive at night, then you're probably picking up people because they get there where they're going by themselves.
Yeah, well, I think the apartment example is an interesting one because I remember we did a YouTube video probably 5 or 6 years ago, and it was all about how to find addresses in mega apartment complex buildings, because often, passengers or customers don't come out.
No.
I mean, I guess while we're here on this note, Sachin, I know I want to hear from you in a second, but Barbara, are there any tips you have for customers out there, whether you're ordering or, what do you think would be helpful in your Uber Eats life these days?
Well, yesterday, for instance, 2 days ago, the last time I drove was a Wednesday, almost everybody came down. And it's really nice when when there's an apartment complex and they say, I'll meet you in the car, I'll meet you in the parking lot. But a lot of times they say, I'm in apartment such and such, and I know what building it is, but I don't have the code to get in, and then I have to have a code for the elevator and all this stuff. And it's a waste of my time. So I'm always appreciated and tell them how much I appreciate when they actually come down.
Well, and I think it's really interesting too to share that perspective, because not a lot of people realize, as couriers or drivers, you are independent contractors, right? And so really, couriers are looking to kind of maximize their time, right? If they've got a passenger in the car, that's when they're making money. If there's no one in the car, they're not making any money, right? If they're looking for an apartment building, they're actually making less per hour, the longer it takes. And, when we talk to, I've talked to tens of thousands of drivers and gig workers over the years. Sachin, I'm curious if you can guess, what's the number one thing that they care about?
Well, flexibility, earnings.
Flexibility and earnings, right? Everyone wants to make more. And I think this apartment example is really interesting because you guys actually have a partnership with the company, Beams, who's actually here showcasing. Okay, there, I see him in the back waving. So I'm sure he got excited when he heard the apartment building issue because they're solving things. So I'd love for you to touch on this specific issue, and if you want to go into the partnership, because I think it is a good example of an opportunity where you have couriers who care about, their number one thing that they care about is making more, and this is a product change that Uber can make to actually help them find apartments faster, make it easier, and actually increase their utilization and earnings, right?
Yeah, I mean, the general thing I would say, including Barbara's feedback, the way we develop our product roadmap is we're getting feedback from couriers and drivers, and what their biggest pain points are. You're right, that time is money. And what we would hear from delivery people is apartment complexes, and Barbara already mentioned what the pain point is. So what used to happen on our system is if the delivery is happening at an apartment complex, you get sent to whatever from a GPS perspective is right in the center of the apartment complex, and some of these are sprawling apartment complexes. Or you get sent to the leasing office, and then you have to get out of your car and you have to walk around and to find this place. So what we started doing a few months ago, both using our own data, because we now with our scale, we have a lot of data, and we have been able to process that data to see where successful deliveries have happened, and working with Beams, because they have put in a lot of effort in this space as well, and leveraging their data, and combining the two to come up with an algorithm where now, and I think we have reached about 50 to 60% of the apartment complexes in the US, where you actually get sent right to the unit. And hey, you know, I've been delivering as well. I've not done thousands of trips, I've done maybe hundreds. And I've had both the experiences, so I know how painful it can be if you're actually sent to the center of an apartment complex, but then what a delight it is if you're actually sent to the exact unit and you can not just the driving directions and the parking, but the actual walking directions to the very building and the unit. So we don't get a lot of proactive praise online about something amazing that Uber has done from drivers. And this is one where, you know, I went to one of those online forums and there's actually proactive comments about, oh, of late I've seen my Uber Eats deliveries are taking me exactly precisely to the location. We know that it really makes a huge difference to couriers.
Yeah, no, I really like that example because I think it's one thing that, you know, for me and my job and my business, I always really like bridging the gap between the experience of a courier and the customer or the company, right? Because I think it's one of those things that you may not see from the outside. Even if you're a customer, you think to yourself, hey, you know, this guy or this gal is lost, I can't find my apartment. You don't really care though, right? You sort of let them figure it out, but you know, a product improvement that actually helps them, you know, the couriers find your apartment faster. It seems so simple, but it actually is having a big impact on their earnings. It gets you your food faster.
And hotter.
And what?
Hotter.
Hotter, too. Yeah, that is a very good distinction because, I mean, time is money, you said, for couriers, but I mean, also with food, it really, you know, the longer it takes to get there, right? I mean, I think that's another big difference. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Barbra. Sachin, you mentioned that you did some driving yourself, and I want to talk about some of the feedback that you're getting from couriers. You know, I think there's a pretty famous video or some tweets of Dara, Uber's CEO, doing some deliveries. I believe it's on an e-bike in San Francisco, which I have to say, you know, seemed a little, you know, little adventurous for me. I love delivery. I love riding e-bikes. We've got some cool e-bike companies, and you can definitely get there faster. And so that was cool to see him doing that. But I'd love to know a little bit more talk about, you know, it sounds like a lot of employees at Uber are actually now driving. And, you know, maybe if you want to dig into, you know, like the relationship you have with Barbra and other couriers and, you know, sort of like where you're getting all this feedback and what you're doing with it too.
Yeah, I mean, look, the main.
I think it sounds like Barbra has your cell phone number too, right?
Barbra has my cell phone number. Barbra has my email address. Barbra can text me and she can email me.
I don't. You know, I don't even have your cell phone number.
Oh, you can have my cell phone number for sure. I think we're at an average of about 7 emails a week, something like that, Barbra. So we get feedback from couriers, and some of them are providing very detailed, deep feedback like Barbra does. By the way, anytime an email comes in and I forward it to my team, everyone knows it's an email from the Barbra. It gets looked at within minutes, and I respond to Barbra within an hour, or if it's the weekend, maybe by the night. And that's because it's super valuable, because she's out there doing the deliveries, she knows the pain points, and then it becomes our responsibility to go fix that. Now, in addition to that, we have a WhatsApp group that you're a part of as well with 5 or 6 other drivers. We have this program called Uber Crew where we get feedback from drivers as well as couriers. We do focus groups. So there are many sources. You go to your website to learn about, you know, what the pain points may be. So there's a lot of sources of feedback. That's the real feedback. But I don't think there's any substitute for personal experience. This is why it's highly encouraged within Uber for us to drive and deliver. I've been driving for maybe about 4 years. I would say in the last 9 months or so, I've done a lot of deliveries. I've learned a lot. Dara, as you said, Dara took his e-bike. Trust me, I got 2 pages of feedback from him, and I had to make sure that I fixed. And one of the principles in our product development, Harry, is no detail is too small to worry about. I'll give you an example. And these are things that you only feel when you actually experience them. So you know how in any app there's a menu that's kind of from the top left. So we have a menu that is on the top left where you go to see your earnings, you go to the settings page. Well, when an offer comes in, it has an X or a decline button. It also is on the top left. So what would happen is if a driver is trying to find their earnings and they want to press the menu and an offer just came in, they were declining it by mistake. It happened to me twice, and then we heard it from a lot of drivers. All we had to do is to move that X from the left to the right, and we fix the issue. But those small little details, when you're actually out in the field, matter a lot.
Well, I'm curious about those small details, right? Because, I mean, there's big things like the apartment complex issue, right, which you can sort of solve, point to and say, hey, you know, we fixed this issue, drivers, you're actually making more money now. I mean, it sounds like there's also just a lot of stuff that needs to be fixed where, you know, maybe you don't get so much credit for. It's just kind of, I guess, part of the job. I mean, it sounds like this is sort of a big job, but also an ongoing process. And, you know, maybe you look for opportunities here and there to, you know, really get big wins. But it seems like it's a monumental task, not to mention the fact that you guys are delivering in multiple countries and in different languages and stuff like that. We'll leave that conversation for another day, but.
Yeah, no, look. 4.4 million earners on the platform in multiple countries. We just have so many scenarios, and if they're doing 10 to 20 deliveries a day, imagine the kind of experiences they're going through. Every single pixel, every single screen matters, and you know, any small experience, if it is not good, will just add up. So that's the philosophy that we use. So just to give you an actual number, just in that category, we have fixed about 350 to 400 issues in the last 6 months. So any individual issue may not seem to count, but collectively it makes a huge difference in your experience.
Anything to add, Barbara?
I had a problem with the tipping thing because you're supposed to be able to tip a blue bar and that says tip, thanks for the tip, and then it's supposed to thank the customer. And I noticed that the blue bar would turn gray, but it would still say thanks for the tip, and it wasn't tipping, wasn't thanking the customer. So I of course got an email and a screen print to Sachin, and the next thing that happened was that the blue bar worked and gave a tip, gave a thank you. And it's, you know, that's the sort of thing that he might not have known about, except that I immediately send this stuff off to him.
Yeah, I really like that feature too. I know when I'm driving and, you know, a customer thanks you for a tip, it's sort of just like a nice little feedback, you know, positive feedback loop mechanism, right? Because obviously, I mean, I think that's, you know, I mean, I would actually kind of argue depending on the person, right? Like, again, it's the positives and negatives, right? If, you know, you go to rides, maybe it's a little, the grass is always greener on the other side. If you're doing rides and you go to food, like, oh, you don't have to deal with people. You don't have to deal with them getting in out of the car. But if you do too much food, you're like, wow, I'm getting a little lonely out here.
Yeah.
You know, I'm kind of picking up and dropping off food. You know, one thing I wanted to ask you about, Barbara, since this is a conference called Curbivore, and, you know, I think we thought of this question or this topic that was really interesting around the curb. And I think last mile delivery is so fascinating because right now, I mean, it's obviously exploded over the past few years. Food delivery, grocery delivery, Amazon, UPS, right? And if you've driven around downtown, there's a lot of cars double parked. There's a lot of issues. You know, ride-hail vehicles can't pick up and drop off. So, you know, I thought this question would be sort of a good one to end on, Barbara. Like, what's been your experience, you know, picking up and dropping off for food delivery? I mean, have you found that there's space? Are there certain parts of town that are better for you, or what do you do?
Well, I'm generally in the area kind of around the South Bay. It's in San Jose and a little bit up East Bay, and I rarely go more than 10 to 15 miles north or south from my area, and so it isn't very cluttered. But if I have a pickup in San Jose, in downtown San Jose, there's on-street parking, but it's metered, and then there are lots that are metered, and I sort of have a religious objection to taking the money from my pocket and putting it in their meter. So
you risk it.
Yeah. So there are some deliveries or some requests for pickup that I just don't take because they're on a street that doesn't have any parking, and then there's a bus lane, and if I go down there and I see like an Amazon truck or a delivery truck of some sort already taking the lane, then I'll tuck in behind it. But if there's nobody there and I'm sitting there in the bus lane, I'm going to get a ticket. And I just can't afford that. I mean, you get a $40 ticket for a $3 delivery.
Right.
Doesn't make sense. So I tend to avoid downtown San Jose.
And I'll be honest, I think tickets are a lot more expensive
Oh, yeah.
around here than $40.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think, Sachin, I'm curious what you think about this type of issue too, because I think this is a real one. I mean, I think it's easy to look out and you see the pickup. Like, people are obviously figuring out what to do.
Yeah.
They're parking illegally or in a meter or double parking. But I personally think this is like something that's very even though we know about it, I do think it's like very under the radar. I think, we've got a lot of good folks from the policy side. Mayor Garcetti will be here speaking later. We've got Salita Reynolds up on a panel next, who's with the LA Department of Transportation. I think this is actually a really interesting opportunity for public-private partnership. I'm curious if you guys have explored this or sort of what you think are the opportunities, because again, right, I think this is a real one that can have a big impact. I'm a little biased. Anything that makes couriers more money, I'm always thinking about. Okay, I think
Thank you.
if I can pick up and drop off a little faster, I can make more.
I mean, first of all, this is one of the biggest pain points. When we talk about why some people prefer to drive rather than deliver, I would say this is definitely one of them. This has to be a public and private partnership. I think what we can bring to the table is we have a lot of data. We have a lot of data about where these deliveries are happening, and we need to partner with some of the public authorities in order for us to be able to make the curb space useful for the next generation. Because I think the definition of what curbs are used for is changing. It's not just for parking cars anymore, it's for activities like these. So we just need to be a lot more proactive on how we use it. What we can do from our side is to offer the data. What we can also do is we can do batching. So rather than 2 couriers showing up at the same restaurant in downtown San Jose, only 1 courier has to go there. Or for 1 courier, rather than them having to go to 2 different restaurants, they only go to 1 restaurant. So I think we can bring, and given the scale of delivery now, we're seeing more than 40% of our orders are actually batched. And now in addition to that, if we could get designated pickup spots so drivers could easily park, if the restaurant may even be motivated to bring it to the curb, and then there's obviously so much new technology that we see around your functions here that I think can bring to bear, and that's what we need to talk about, but it'll have to be a partnership.
I mean, so what might something look like? Is it you just need access to some pickup and drop off spaces, and then you think that would eliminate a lot of the double parking and things like that? I mean, the batching is interesting too. Going back to though, the only sort of skepticism I have with batching, right? When you do a ride and you drop someone off A to B and it takes a little longer, they still get to 100% of their destination. Right, with food, the quality might be deteriorating. If it's French fries, literally every second matters, right? Every second matters, right? If you want to get them nice and crispy. I guess that's one challenge with batching is that second person, is their food is going to take longer to arrive than normal, right?
I think what we have done is, because this is also a choice the customer makes, so if you look at the Uber Eats app, they're able to specify that this is a priority order, or this is a standard order. If you specify it's a priority order, there's no batching, or you're getting your food first. So I think it's also about putting the choice in the customer's hands. And a lot of people select standard because I can wait a little bit, but if they need their fries faster, they have the option to do that. But I do think that it is a partnership, of course, with the public authorities, with us, but also with eaters and restaurants. Let's not forget the restaurants and the actual retail locations, because this matters a lot to them as well. Because they have a pain point if suddenly multiple cars are going to be double parked in front of their curb space. You'll see in some of these strip malls, they're actually designated a few spaces for delivery. I think that's great. I've had an experience where for delivery drivers only, that's a delight. I think we need to propagate that more and more, because delivery is here to stay.
Yeah, well, and I think that sort of gets back to really why we're having this conference. There's sort of the aspect of having the pickup and drop off spaces, but also making them dynamic, right? Because there's going to be times where, just a few spots aren't enough. I know we've got companies like Vade who are, working on problems just like this. And, I think also one thing you mentioned, I just had the CEO of Coco, who's going to be here speaking later, or one of their representatives are, and they shared a really interesting use case with me where, there are certain basically delivery orders where actually, maybe you don't want someone like Barbra in a car delivering, right? Maybe there is no parking, or maybe it's tough, they've got a lot of orders. Barbra, are there certain orders that you kind of tend to avoid, or maybe, maybe someone on an e-bike, or maybe even a delivery robot you think could do a better job, or, it would save you time, or do you want to take them all for yourself? Open the mic, because that was a good joke.
I want every single one of them. But in the area that I'm in, even downtown San Jose, it's not dangerous. And I'm not driving after dark. So I really don't have any concern about that. There's, weird people down the street, but none of it's dangerous. And basically, I want all of them. Give me all of it.
Well, I think that's interesting because I think that's a challenge that Sachin, you're going to have to sort of balance, right? I mean, are you looking at other modes, whether it's micromobility? I think you guys have partnered on the micromobility side to provide e-bikes or even scooters for couriers. I think e-bike is a great vehicle for a courier. Sort of most efficient and quickest and also cheapest, frankly. So are you
Especially in
looking?
San Francisco. I don't know how anybody would do it in the car in San Francisco.
Yeah, well, first of all, we should also remember that we are expanding the options of what actually gets delivered. It's not just food from a restaurant anymore, right? A lot of partnerships and acquisitions that we have done. It is grocery, it is direct orders. We're delivering orders from Apple, given our partnership with Postmates, etc., etc. So
What are some of your newer, faster growing ones? Is it like B2B services, like Apple partnerships?
So they're all growing. Of course, our largest is still restaurant delivery.
What are your favorites, though?
I love it when I can pick up an iPhone from an Apple store. I can deliver it. I think that's great. It's different. That is growing very fast for us. Grocery, obviously, you're going to hear from Oscar later on from Corner Shop. That's growing very, very fast. And I think a lot of these options are going to grow. And then similarly on the delivery side, we will need a variety of options as well. Because obviously, I think the heart and soul is going to be couriers like Barbra. But then, we have announced that we're going to be partnering with both Serve as well as Motional. And we're going to launch pilots on those later this year, and we'll see how that goes. Because I do think that we need to have an ecosystem of these delivery options, but it's going to take a while. I think the heart and soul is going to be the couriers, and we're going to just continue to build a great product for them.
Well, and I think just the final thing I wanted to ask you, Sachin, is, it seems, you mentioned all these new verticals that Uber is getting into, and it seems to me from the outside that this is like a pretty clear strategy, right? You've got companies that are doing food delivery, you've got companies that are doing rides, but I'm curious how you think about, what do you think is really the main benefit of offering all these different verticals across grocery? Is it more, it's going to be better unit economics? Is it better on the driver side? Is it better on the customer side? I'm sure there are a lot of positives, but if you had to pick one, what would it be?
As Barbra said, all of the above. So if you look at both the consumer side as well as the earner side, and we are already seeing this actually happen. On the consumer side, if I can go to one company and I can, we have this strategy called the go-get strategy. If I need to go to the airport or if I need to go to the office, but also if I need to get food delivered or I need to get, something delivered from the Apple store, I can just use the same company, right? I don't have to create two different accounts. It's just much easier. For us, unit economics is great. For the customer, the experience is great. Similarly, on the earner side, as we talked about earlier, a lot of them are preferring to do both trips as well as deliveries because they use the same platform. When commuting is busy, deliveries may not be busy, like lunch hour, you're delivering food, dinner hour, you're delivering food, and then there's commute time. It just allows you to stay busy for much longer. But then there are some people who are preferring to just do deliveries, and some people who are preferring to do just rides, which is just fine. You want to make sure that it's flexible.
Well, Barbra, I think I solved your problem of smelly food in the back seat. What about delivering an iPhone? I imagine if you got a 5% tip on a $600 iPhone, that might be pretty nice.
I don't think that the stuff that, like Apple, I don't think that customers can tip. I think Uber sticks in a little bonus. So what's funny is that I picked up from 7-Eleven. A lot of times it's liquor. But the other day I picked up cigarettes, and then later I picked up a box of butter. Now I find it hard to believe that somebody orders butter or cigarettes from 7-Eleven and has it delivered. I delivered 1 cup of coffee, 20-minute trip, 1 cup of coffee, and I said to the lady when she took it from my hand, I said, "This is the most expensive coffee I have ever delivered."
I think I just found something for you to stick around, Barbra, and I think if anyone wants to know what are some of the interesting, strangest, funniest items that you've ever delivered, I think you're the person to talk to, so feel free to come find Barbra after. I want to really say thank you to Barbra, Sachin, and everyone else for listening and checking out our first panel.